right, I think we'll just get started. I won't start with a Chef Alex question, but essentially, again, I first of all want to thank you, your speakers from this afternoon, our speaker from late this morning, and then of course our skills building from earlier today. I do want to say that Chef Dimitri, he had to actually go back to his restaurant to prepare for dinner service, so he will not be on our panel today. And we do appreciate that he took the time out to come be with us. So I'm going to start with a more global question, and this is not geared at any specific person, but I would appreciate, we'll just go down the line, and if you feel like it's out of your wheelhouse, just pass the microphone on, okay? So as the world transforms, cultures are mixing and melding together. So how do you approach culture appropriately without offending? So being mixed race, people identify with multiple cultures, and assuming they are XYZ seems to cause even more problems. So how do you approach, and this I realize comes up in all, so if we're doing a study, right, how do you, if one doesn't check a box very easily, how do you approach that? If somebody, yeah, so.
Is this on? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. I think, I mean, you said it in the question, not assuming is a part of that. But also realizing that we all assume, that's our nature, is how we make decisions. So I think it's part of that. And then also not only asking, and also in research, it is very, if you do very quantitative work, which I also do, it's easy to ask a survey question and have checkups. But then when you're doing like a one-on-one interaction, it's important not only to know where people are coming from, but also the relationship they have with that heritage country. Because we can, again, not assuming, we cannot assume that because they come from country X that they have a close relationship to country X, because people have sometimes very difficult relationships with the places that they come from. So I think, yeah, again, it's just not assuming and asking questions.
Thank you. I think that's important, not assuming, and also the way you, in my case, talking from culinary aspect, is just respect. And I think in the skill builder this morning, I was talking about Caribbean food, right? So one of the disclaimers that I say is, okay, I'm talking about Caribbean food, but keep in mind, Caribbean is big, and there's Hispanic Caribbeans, and sadly, we think that we are the only Caribbeans, right? But there's a West Indian Caribbeans. And this respect, I think it's respect with not assuming that we are the only Caribbean, using us as an example, but also respect the different ingredients and the fact that respect the culture and the application of those.
Thank you.
I agree with that. Starting from a point of genuine respect it's recognizable. In teaching the undergraduates in community classes, in medical school classes, when we're introducing that we're teaching the Mediterranean diet, we're very pointed in explaining that these are elements of a diet that can be applied to many different kinds of cuisines, and we encourage talking about that, we encourage thinking about it, ask us questions about how you might want to incorporate it into whatever cuisine is traditional to you. And especially when the classes are online, people can substitute all kinds of things, and that's when it gets really interesting, and we encourage it a lot. We say, what do you have at home? What spices do you use? What vegetables might you substitute? And it makes a very rich conversation. So we approach it as, let's enrich all of our experiences. Please share what you have and what you're bringing, because the Mediterranean diet principles are not meant to be laws. They're guidelines in incorporating it in whatever way is going to help you achieve whatever your nutrition goals are. And if those include maintaining your cultural heritage or using them to improve the nutrition of a recipe that you have, we encourage that. So we just bring it right up.
Thank you.
This one is on. Oh, it is on. Yeah, both from having been a professor for 13 years and as a chef, I think the biggest thing is to just ask, right? I think how you self-identify is more important than how someone else identifies you.
So my work is more observational data collection So again, as Melissa mentioned, it is mostly using surveys or standard set of questionnaires. But one thing that I would emphasize that if you're doing a study or collecting such data, you want to make sure that you have someone who is from the same cultural background so that they can ask the questions with sensitivity appropriately, and you give them training. So how far do you take a probing set of questions? How far do you probe on say dietary assessment? Things like that. So I guess it's training and making sure that the interviewer or whoever is doing the interview is from the same cultural background, has some can how do you identify to some extent what is being told to them.
What's the question?
I was going to see if you could, we're saying in a world where there's so much, we can use melting pot or whatever term we want to use, where people are not just one culture, so you can't check off. So when you're talking about food choices, and rather than assuming, how do you approach that conversation when you're talking about food with the people that you work with?
Right. I think someone mentioned it, I think part of, and I didn't discuss it, but part of assessing anything is really strongly based on an evaluative process, right? And just asking someone what they like, what they don't like, and really kind of doing a medium dive on that piece and collecting that information, because at the end of the day, we do want to have some concrete data, so we're moving our decisions in our directions of whatever programs we're doing, and we're impacting it, and we're learning. And the only way to do that, I mean, whether you call it an evaluation, but it's definitely asking the right questions, asking intentional questions, not the standard, what comes out of the box, but more customized to the audience that you're trying to impact, and really try to take an intentional method of learning, what some of the barriers, choices, and possible solutions or suggestions can be. And then, from a culinary perspective, you design the recipes around that. So, for example, there's this huge debate that you can't get communities of color to eat kale. And I said, no, you're wrong, because last year we did a program in the Bronx and I cleaned the kale. It was 100 pounds. But the recipe that we had was a Southern goddess green kale salad with dried fruit. It was just like, and we didn't label it as healthy. We just labeled it as, food that tastes good and makes you feel good. And the kale was gone. So, I mean, it's really being creative about what are our approaches that could, work and be, impactful from a sustainable way.
So I'm going to ask a follow-up question on that with the kale. During the class, how was this discussion about kale in this? So when people walked in and they saw this kale that was going to happen, was there an open discussion, humor around?
No, I mean, you want to kind of distract from the fact that you're trying to sell something healthy. At the end of the day, sometimes you have to be surreptitious and sneak it in. You know what I mean? Like, how do you get your kids to eat X? Or how do you get the community to eat? And I mean, it is what it is. I mean, sometimes I'm not saying you lie, but you do have to be surreptitiously crafty about how you present it. So you talk about all the other ingredients except the kale. You know what I mean? Because they won't, because kale has that negative connotation, and if it's, if it's poorly cooked, it could be a traumatizing experience, and you'll never have a chance of reintroducing it again.
I love it. It's all about the massage, or partly about the massage, right? And I just want to reflect on, Jennifer, what you mentioned about the virtual classes, because for those of you that have not experienced that environment, it really is amazing how what first feels like a limitation, that you're not in the same space as somebody, that coming out of people saying, hey, I couldn't get to the store, this is the spices I have behind me in my cabinet. And that awkwardness of somebody being in their own space, they're not in a shiny kitchen where somebody else is getting the pots and pans for you, makes such a difference for them to realize, oh, I can work with this. Oh, I do have a thumb knife, but someone's going to teach me how to use the honing stick. Probably not using the right term, the honing device. And it's just amazing and so freeing in a lot of ways that you can reach people that you couldn't otherwise reach. So thank you for bringing up that environment. So Chef Camp, this is first a pow to your green sauces. People really were just excited to see, again, such a variety of green sauces. And this goes, and I would like, the reason, this is more a comment than a question, but I'm turning into a question, is more the sense of, if you could give kind of the one-liner for those that weren't there, and also just emphasizing how this is, when we think of eating greens, it doesn't have to be the poorly massaged kale salad, that it can look in many different forms. So you could just expand on that a little bit.
We teach a lot of online classes together. One line. Whew, one line?
I know, that's why I said one line. 'Cause I
My
know
class
it'd be a
went
full
overtime.
paragraph.
God, that's really hard. How would I sum it up in one line? Is that everything I learned in culinary school, technique fantastic, ingredients horrible. So I learned things that just weren't going to keep people healthy, which is how I ended up going back to school to learn about nutrition. And it's to really put flavor first, right? So that's why the kale salad sold, because it wasn't about the kale. It was about the dressing. It was about dried fruit? Dried fruit, so sweetness, right? So if you went to my talk yesterday, it's all about balancing flavor. That would be my one line. Balance flavor, and you can eat anything, right? All foods taste good, even ones you never thought you liked, right? I don't know, overcooked Brussels sprouts. Kale that hasn't been properly prepared, right? But you add spice and you add flavor and you use proper technique, and all of a sudden it's not the icky.
I love this. Now you're talking to your 10-year-old too with that conversation. And just, I think the other part, maybe I'm adding a line here, but how those green sauces are from all over the world, right? So
We did every continent.
that's fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so Jennifer, I hope you have some water near you for, I'm not going to give you have a lot of questions, which is fantastic, but I'm going to start with the most common was actually, what was the textbook?
Oh, the textbook was, it was Nutrition for Culinary Professionals. We can give you the name of it specifically, but we actually would not recommend using it. And here's the reason. We learned something. We wanted to find a textbook that would not be so clinical, because we didn't have any prerequisites. And so these students may not have taken microbiology, organic chemistry and all these things, and we can explain something with a bunch of carbons and say, this is what it means to be, omega-6. So we wanted to present it as a food-forward understanding of nutrition. However, the textbook really was, food-forward, but also this is how you serve it in your restaurant, very much about food service, and it didn't apply to the students, really. So we have to find other ways to present this important nutritional information using a scientific support without being too clinical. So we're still on the hunt of how we're going to do that. Yeah, she's saying I have to write one.
And with the GW speed, so you better have it done in a month. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Here is our amazing research presenter. This question's for you. Yes, that would be you. Okay, so in the South Asian women who did not assimilate, do they have the same cardiometabolic risk factors as their South Asian cohorts who did not immigrate?
So you mean South Asian women living in India, basically, right?
Correct, yes. So women that stayed in India, kind of similar demographics versus those that immigrated.
There is one study. So there is a study funded out of Emory University, which actually does a similar study, which has, I'm not sure if it has diet, but I think they do find that, I don't know the number, so I have to say that I'll have to look it up, but I do think that, yes, there is a higher rate, at a lower age for cardiometabolic risk in South Asians in general. So there is a concern anyways, and then you have all of these other additional challenges and burdens when people go from their country of birth to a host country. So yes, there are, but I wouldn't be able to tell you the number if it matches and it's the same. But yeah, if anyone wants to look it up, it's called the CARS study. It's out of Emory University. So if they want to PubMed it, that is where they find that info.
Perfect, thank you. I assume no one else wants to chime in. All right, so Chef Alex, this one's for you, and other people can chime in on this as well. But this was directed towards you specifically. So can we change a diet without addressing other social determinants such as environment, food deserts, or food apartheid, educational level, et cetera?
Can we change diets with?
Can we change diet? Yeah, so essentially, let's change what you're eating without addressing these other factors.
I think they're one and the same. I mean, diet is closely related to environmental and social determinants of health. And I would rethink changing diet. I mean, that doesn't even go so well when someone says I need to change. I mean, so, how can we improve, our intake? And then it's just a sidebar. I think it's very important that we are conscientious about labels, all right, and labeling people, especially communities of color, because we've suffered from labels, for many generations. So, when we say, let's just say what the question is around, diet, is there a better way of saying it that's more warm, that's more friendly? Because it doesn't sound very friendly. And then when you mix diet and health, it implies that you need to go on a diet and you're not healthy. I mean, subconsciously. But the short answer to that is no. It has to be a comprehensive approach and should include all of those things. And quite frankly, when you look at the food system itself, which is another layer, you want to be able to have this relationship of understanding where your food comes from, and how it's grown, and really get close and personal, especially as we start moving people to a plant-forward perspective, eating meat, knowing where that comes from, making sure it's good meat. You know what I mean? I mean, these are kind of things I think are prerequisites to really influencing, that spectrum of the question.
Does anyone else want to chime in on this? No. Okay. So the one piece I would add, which I think is interesting, is where we're getting our information, not just from who, but where, right? So if we're at the hospital, what I often perceive as kind of this very sterile environment that might be really removed from my own community, versus if I am receiving this information of how to empower myself and my community in the community itself, that can make a big difference. Because if we're in the community and asking, again, what resources are available to buy fruits, vegetables, whole grains, what fruits, vegetables, whole grains do you enjoy eating? When it's in a space that is again, within a community that you're trying to work with, rather than in this very separated, often there can be vilification or pointing fingers, it can change the conversation a lot. So I work a lot in community, so just a little advocacy there for that. Okay, this is another easy-ish one. So what is the nutritional analysis program that you use, Jennifer, for your program?
Carrie, I'm forgetting the name
Dial
of
a
it.
friend? Are you dialing a friend?
What was the nutritional analysis program we used? Food care. I should have just listened to Barbara the 3 times she said it into my ear. Food care.
All right, thank you.
Can I just answer one more thing? There are tons of them,
Yes.
right? And what you really want to know is that they're using USDA data, or maybe the Minnesota data, but you want to make sure they're not just using, I don't know, my data. I kind of think, tasted it. Yeah, that's good. It has enough, right? You just have to, that's the biggest key, is to really make sure that whatever analysis program you're using has the USDA database information. You can use the USDA database as well. It's online. It's just not going to do the other stuff.
Is it something that you would need to pay for, or there's resources like the USDA?
There are free ones.
Okay.
You just have to be careful with where they're getting their data. So like Chronometer is a free one, or the light version is free. You just have to make sure that when you pick the food, you're picking one that says USDA standard, or, so you're making sure that it's legit data.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, this is going again, Jennifer. When you're working with a university to advocate for culinary medicine to be added to a curriculum, do you suggest starting with undergraduate courses or graduate level?
I don't actually do that work.
Okay.
I don't advocate that. So I'm going to punt.
Okay, perfect. Has anyone else started any programs on the panel that would be able to answer? Because my short answer is a lot of it is, and you talked about, Jennifer, a little bit, follow the resources. So you know the different demographics you want to work with. And sometimes starting, like you mentioned, that the funding, you could access a certain part of it by working with undergraduate program. And sometimes that's a way to start getting more eyes on what's happening.
Yeah, and if I could add just intuitively, I would say beyond following the funding is following the support, right? So it started organically, and I guess that's the best way to do it. Organically, students went to the dean of the School of Medicine, so it started with an elective, right? I guess it depends on what is happening on your campus and who is your advocate.
And the other, just even going smaller than what you have created, is really if starting and thinking really small. And I know Dr. Greg Harlan talked about that a little bit yesterday, of if you do even have an interest group among residents or medical students or otherwise, and you're using a conference room and having foods, a potluck. So it's people are bringing a dish and inviting people that then you can have as buy-in. And that's the biggest thing, because if they're able to see, especially if it's hands-on or at least a demo, then you start getting the buy-in, because they're able to see the conversation, that it is science-based, that there's really a huge amount of growth that can happen from that environment. So that's my biggest advice, is starting small, not feel like, where am I going to find $5 million for a teaching kitchen? So, all right, and then going along with that, so what are some of the professional talking points to bring up to get money? This again might be.
That's a great question. I think they answered that yesterday. I was mentioning it during my talk this morning, that if you convince the money holders that there is a problem and here is a solution, that is better than saying there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Here's the problem. We know there's the problem. Here's the solution. And here's how we could possibly get that to be self-funded in X many years. That's one way to do it.
And this opens it up to others that may. So looking at any program that you've tried to start. So I know, Chef Alex, you've started many programs, and most of us who are entrepreneur in any way, there have been some yeses and some nos. So what would you say? So the question is also, what are some of the, wow, my brain's thinking half in Spanish, half in English, rebuttals? Is that the? Yes, thank you. Spanish is my first language. I know I don't look like that, but that may be the case. But okay, also, what are some of the rebuttals you have experienced, so that I can be ready for those? Meaning, when you've gotten a no, or when someone looks at you funny that you want to bring a program, what do you feel have been some ways to stand up tall and say, actually, this is important because X, Y, Z? Any of you?
Oh, I feel like she answered that question earlier with her chef who said no, the guy who was on the video. You have to find the thing that makes them say yes, right? So with the chef on that video, it was that he had initially no buy-in, but then it was like, what did he say? I've sold a 200 blah, blah, blah of this dish. Like for a restaurateur, that's like ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. I like this healthy stuff.
That's good.
Yeah, you don't give up. And you just keep looking for the next person who's going to possibly give you that buy-in. Build a coalition. I mean, one of the things that happened at GW is that there was a lot of meetings, a lot of people. And when you start to talk more and more people, it makes more and more sense. So when there's coalition and buy-in from the ground up and from the top down, it's a little bit easier to find that money. So invite a lot of people along to your classes, find out who else is an advocate. They might be doing it somewhere else in some other way. Just keep building support.
And the other part too is, if you think the straight line says no, that doesn't mean it's the only way in. All right, so this is for you, Dr. Fuster. Are there any tips for healthier food options at home? So healthier restaurants may be inaccessible and at times expensive for everyday meals.
Yes, that last point is very true, and that's something I think about a lot in the work that I've been doing with restaurants, because I work with restaurants, and then some of the ones that are doing really innovative work around healthy foods are things that people usually cannot afford. So some of the things that I'm trying to do is how we can bring those innovations from that high-end cuisine down to more community level restaurants like the ones that I presented here. And my hope, and I do need to do a study to see if this works, is that if you go to a restaurant and you try like a beautiful kale or Brussels sprouts, maybe you might be more inclined to try it at home. I mean, and I do this, I think about this from my own experience. Growing up in Puerto Rico, I didn't eat a lot of vegetables. We didn't have a lot of, like now I think we do have more farmers markets and things like that. So it wasn't until I had more money to go to restaurants and maybe try little foods like actually Brussels sprouts, beets. Those were things that my mom used to eat beets out of a can, and it looks so awful. And I'm like, I'm never eating this thing until I tried it at a restaurant. It's like, oh, okay. And then I bought beets and made it at home. So my hope, again, I don't know if that's doable or possible, is that as people are more exposed to these new ways of looking and preparing foods, that they're more inclined to do so versus looking for a recipe, buying the food from the supermarket. If they don't like it, that's food waste. So I think that that might be a more of a entry point to then potentially bring it home.
Thank you. So Jennifer, there are a few questions on this, and asking essentially what videos did you use, what coursework. So if you could kind of, so essentially people are asking, did you make your own videos? How did you make the videos? Did you use the Health Meets Food curriculum, and do you use the same curriculum as you do for community or med students? So kind of that topic.
Okay, so we focused on videos and information from the community modules because those were not as technical as the medical school or CME. So a lot of the curriculum was pulled from the community classes and the articles from there as well, and the videos and all of that. Where we diverged, I think, was definitely in our projects and our guest speakers and things like that. We also did, we have been on the hunt for really good videos that can be found on YouTube and wherever, some other places. We were looking for some from Marion Nessel, and things like that. So that will be in our syllabus, that will be available to those who are using this curriculum. We're updating that now. So a lot of my summer project, to be honest, is to be looking at a lot of videos and seeing what we want to replace or what we want to add, I would say, what videos we want to add that are steeped in science, supportable, and relevant to what we're talking about.
Thank you. And how did you choose within the modules which recipes to use? And it sounds like you're curating that down even further.
Yeah, we are curating that down. So some of them logically fit. A lot of the modules, the anti-inflammatory module has recipes that we typically use. So we followed a lot. To be honest, Carrie picked the recipes, and I think that she picked them based on skill level and time. So we definitely didn't put the harder recipes in there. So there was some changing them around based on that. Yeah.
And to add, someone else had a comment that it'd be nice if the curriculum was available in Spanish, and the community courseware actually is available in Spanish. There's Spanish beginner, intermediate also? Perfect, so intermediate, so there's 6-week beginner, 6-week intermediate, there's family class, and there's also, I'm missing one, pregnancy and pediatrics. And older adults, yes. And so essentially there's a curriculum that's used to get certified, but there's also the community-based or facing curriculum with the videos, so, okay. All right, I like this question for all of you, hold on. Okay. Chef Crusella, we haven't heard from you in a while, so we'll start with you, okay? What would be the one piece of advice that you would give to someone just starting out in the culinary medicine field?
Piece of advice. Okay. From my side, I would say just respect the ingredient. Okay, it's like it could be kale, it could be different ingredients. Just respect the ingredient. See it. Probably you don't like it, but you need to respect. You need to see it, try to produce it, prepare in a right way. I think that's that when you get familiar with your ingredients, things are getting easier because you know how it works, and I think that's a good way to do it.
So I'm going to take this point of view for a dietitian. So if you're a dietitian and you have not encountered culinary medicine in your own career yet and you want to enter it, I would say see if there's a culinary medicine program happening near you and offer to help. So offer to come speak at one of their classes or help in the kitchen or whatever. And going to these conferences and letting people know that you're interested in doing it obviously is another great way to do it.
Same as her.
Yep.
I don't know if I have the expertise for this. So.
My recommendation is, like there's 10, 12, food is medicine conferences this year alone. It's a really powerful emerging space. My thing is all about connecting dots and like everything. If we're trying to impact community, how do we start forming the basis for movement building, and which is very applicable to wellness. So, my answer to that is, let's not operate in silos. Let's try to learn what's happening in the different spaces and places. We don't have to agree with everything because that's not the nature of learning. It's the nature of learning is really trying to get as much knowledge and skill transfer going as possible. And that means that we really have to have kind of like a mindset of cross-pollination. How are we going to make this, these seeds, flourish, within ourselves, within each other, and within the community. And I think, if we really contemplate on that, we can have, a really powerful learning experience, because we're not going to learn what we need to learn in our lifetime. It's going to be continued. So how do we enter this with entering a race mentality of let's try to absorb as much as we can. Let's try to learn. Let's try to have high level emotional debates. Again, not necessarily agreeing, but learning.
Thank you. I do love that you brought up how many conferences there are now related to this. And I find the piece, so if someone's at this conference, this is your first view of culinary medicine. My first conference, I literally started crying when the keynote speaker started talking, to learn that these two worlds could really come together. And I literally went home and I Googled teaching kitchens. And that's how I found a place that is now one of the biggest places that I work with. So finding out there's a lot of spaces now where you can find culinary medicine and teaching kitchens in your own space. And a lot of times this is finding how you can get involved by watching. People love volunteers. So can you go wash dishes and watch how a chef talks about this, or a physician or a dietitian, or just see spaces where this is taking place. And that is such a great place to start also knowing how do you want to enter it? Because if there's 6 conferences going on, even in the last several months, there's so many different viewpoints to come in and realize what sings to you, not what you should be doing, but really what sings true to you, and continue to follow the road that might look completely different than what it looks like when you're sitting here right now. Any other thoughts on this thought? No? Okay. So this is kind of a follow-up with that. So if you do have a space where you're now doing teaching kitchens, and that could look, again, a surface in a church, it could be in a community center, it could be at a Rolls-Royce teaching kitchen, who do you feel are the right people to have in the room at a minimum? Meaning, not the participants, but on the teaching side. So chef, dietitian, physician, coaching, what do you feel if you had to say your top 2 or 3?
A chef dietitian.
And then you just need one person. And a dishwasher, maybe. All right. So Jennifer, yes, please chime in.
I mean, I would say that I would think of the participants too, because I did, in a previous life when I was a graduate student, when culinary medicine, I don't think even the term was as present. I recall doing this thing at a community where we actually got Puerto Ricans to like brown rice, so similar to the kale, that it was something that people say, this is not done. And the way we got people to do it was that it wasn't us cooking the rice for them. It was because one participant, a Puerto Rican woman, liked brown rice, and she was the one that taught them how to do it. So, I mean, it's not, I mean, you guys are amazing chefs, dietitians, yes. But I feel when you're working, especially with communities, having somebody like you that is doing it, that is dealing with your same family members saying, oh, I don't eat that, then it's very important to think about including the culinary skills of the community in there.
I'm actually thrilled that you just brought that up, because that I find that it's the same. It's a peer-to-peer rather than top-down or expert down, but not knowing what's around you. And some places actually get volunteer chefs and will again have find out what foods are loved within the community that we're working with, and then ask chefs specifically for that. For example, one community I work with is mainly Latino-based. We have certain chefs that come in, and then we did a cohort with a Filipino community, and we had we went out and asked kind of the foods that were interesting, and we actually grew different produce in the garden for several months leading up to that class, and we invited different chefs to come in for exactly that reason. And now one of the weeks is always a peer-to-peer teaching one another, and then they now have monthly classes where they each share their favorite recipe. So thank you again for bringing that up. How are we doing? Good, we still have some time. So Jennifer, this is going to your maybe ache points of the class you just did. So what did you find to be some of those gaps from the instructor expectations? So kind of some of the student misunderstandings in the content part of your course.
That's going to take up all of our time. Okay. Oh, all right. A lot of them had to do with writing. So one of them was we didn't imagine that we would have to explain that the students had to cite when they made a factual representation. They asked us which system we cared about, which citation system. We said, we don't care which one you use, just use one. We don't know if they took that to mean they don't have to cite, but they were making factual representations without citing them. So that was the first one. We had to make it clear that you have to cite and show them how to do that. Some other gaps, we described the barriers project, what we thought was very clear. And we still got a few submissions that were just like way off the mark. And so we went back and thought, like, did we not explain that well? And so we really clarified. We went back for the next 2 projects that we were doing the research project. I think the research project was the one, whichever one, we went back and really thought about it from the point of view of someone who has no idea what we're talking about. Like, how do we describe exactly what we want? And then we got closer. And one of the things that we did was if a student really missed the mark, we offered them a chance to redo it. We were not sticklers, and we really wanted them to A, learn it, B, do it, and C, feel good about the class. This is not a weed out class. This is not a major class. We wanted them to learn something and get something out of it. So if they really missed it, we offered any student they wanted to redo, and they did.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I feel like that's more and more common in education at different levels of, okay, so you learn that this was not the best work and to give another chance, just like in life, maybe. So, All right, Chef Alex, and others may want to answer this as well. But so when you're talking about, you talked about soul food in your talk, what is your feeling or recommendation about someone wanting to change it because it's so bad for you versus saying this is soul food and I'm going to own this dish for what it is, and perhaps talk about, like you did, calories or how often you have it or otherwise. So I don't know how you would answer that question.
Well, just in this room, I would say that you can reframe it as healthy soul food, but don't say that publicly. But, I mean, just think about it. It's really about exploring the possibilities of what an ingredient swap would look like and if it's acceptable. And that, and it might even be a cooking method. For example, we just finished work in the Virgin Islands, which has a really deep food cultural history. And we took their typical fried bread, their beignet bread, and we made it into a cookie. Same flavor profile. And, I went with a master baker, which I wanted her to take the heat if it didn't work. But and we had the critics ready to, condemn it. But, the flavor profile was acceptable. And then we talked about, wow, this is, it's life-changing to move from a fried food to a baked food. That's game-changing right there. So we have to think creatively about what kind of culinary power, whether it's the science, whatever, of what we can do that doesn't appear that it's taking away from the heritage or the integrity of what you're eating. We did a brown rice brownie, which was I didn't think that was going to work either, but it did. And so I think one of the more from a culinary science perspective is something that we have to remember that I learned in culinary school is the brain. You have to acquire the taste and just the flavor profile to register in the brain. You have to try it like 3 times. So the trick is to get people to try the ingredient 3 times, and then you have a better shot of incorporating it into their diet. That's the trick, using brain chemistry. So we got to be really surreptitious, like I said before. So, I think it's really about using these approaches, and you can make kale chips. I mean, it's just like, the right spices and everything, it's better than a potato chip. So we really have to be creative. And when people say, "Oh, this tastes good," you've hit the ball out of the park.
Thank you. Anyone else want to input on experiences with this? No? Okay. All right, this is going to be, we're going to go equipment just for a bit here. So this is for the chefs on the panel. What pots and pans would you recommend for an induction stovetop, as a lot of the world is moving towards induction stovetops?
Ones that work on it?
That's a good start, yes.
I'm not a believer that, these 2 other chefs might stab me. I don't think it matters. If you can cook, you can cook with anything, right? So, I don't think you have to have the $180 knife. I don't think you need, super fancy dancy pans. You need to have a pan that works on induction, which means it has to be stainless steel. It can't be aluminum. You want a pan that can withstand heat and not have the rivets pop out, like happens on aluminum pans sometimes. But I don't think you need, what is it? What's the brand with a T? No, it's like a fancy pan, like Tremolulo, something Italian-y. Like $300 a pan. Like, no, not necessary. But you want a solid, good stainless steel pan and make sure it's induction ready, and that would be my advice.
I mean, you can Google it. The answers are there. I mean, people have experienced successes and failures, and you want to get to, what their successes and failures. My personal view is, when you're using a cooking instrument like a pan, you want from a culinary perspective to have a heavy bottom, because that just helps, right? So you want to stay away from the thin bottoms, because that's really not good to cultivate the flavor or anything else that you're trying to do. But I would say, ask Google.
Yeah, there's different brands, different for every budget. So it's like, in that case, is as long as you work in induction stove, doesn't matter.
Perfect. And then equipment question for you, Jennifer. What is the indoor grill you were referencing to?
Oh, which one?
Mhm.
I am happy to, if someone, whoever wanted to know, just send me a note. I don't have it memorized, but I could look at the grill when we get back to the kitchen. But it really is good. There's a weird thing about it though, so I'm gonna tell you so that when you get it, you don't say, what? It's a grill that requires you to put water under the grill, which makes no sense to us because that's not how any other grill works. Why would there be water? But it works. I don't know, it just works.
Fantastic. All right, Chef Cruzado, this one's for you. Any plans to incorporate West Indies, Caribbean to hands-on?
Yes, I have to. Actually, yeah, because I always get the hit with that. Especially now in our case, and I think I mentioned in the skill building, I'm blessed because now I have another Caribbean chef coming here, and Chef Chelsea is working with me, and she's from, I think it's Trinidad and Tobago. So we talking about, because our first conversation, it was for a dinner, the dinner party that we have, and it's supposed to be Caribbean food, and I was like, right in the menu, bam, 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 and she interject, oh, you're gonna do this? I was like, that's not Caribbean. And she was like, excuse me? Yes, this is Caribbean. We are on the other side. And I was like, oh, that's when I realized that we are very Hispanic Caribbeans. We are like, we think we are the only Caribbeans. But yes, that made me think there's a lot of profile flavors that we can include in our cuisine and mix it and make like a really holistic Caribbean cuisine. So that's part of the plan.
We didn't eat that long ago, but this conversation is making me hungry. So Chef Alex, this actually goes back. Someone just submitted this question to the soul food conversation. So thinking of Pedro equals poor or soul food is unhealthy, dismissing the importance of heritage, it feels like we need to change language, how we talk about this as an empowering way, focusing on abundance, not restriction. Do you have a favorite resource, website, book, or podcast that helps us build better language around this topic?
Well, I created a book based on the program Mindful Eating for the Beloved Community, and I do agree that language is important, right? You know, healthcare has a language, culinary professionals have a language. We must be aware that we need to be, as a leader in this space, capable of multiple languages within our language. So, you know, I think it's really important that you know, we don't try to tarnish what is part of tradition. That's not cool, right? It is what it is, and it represents X. And, you know, we need to build upon that as well, and create, you know, from those same seeds, you know, different aspects that can be updated. Everything gets updated, right? Everything gets renovated, everything evolves. And I think once we start kind of educating people that, you know, life is that journey, that train ride, and it started out when you were born and, you know, ends when it ends. But the fact of the matter is, it's like, you know, on this journey that we're taking together, how do we reflect on some of the stuff that was traditional? How do we build upon it? And then, is there any way that we can replicate some of those things that are, you know, iterations of that same thing, and talk about how we got there? And again, that's where culinary innovation comes into that, food science comes into that, and I think, you know, as added partners in what we're trying to accomplish there, I would definitely add the food science component, because that is a set space that can really help with the culinary innovative process that we're trying to achieve.
Thank you. So there's a question here that I'm just going to guide you. So whoever asked this, or anyone in the audience, could you talk more about starting the culinary medicine-based programs? Specifically, what is the community curriculum that we mentioned? So if you go to culinarymedicine.org, you can get some information through there. If you do not have enough, we know Dr. Harlan's email, or you can also go through the website to find out more information. And it is something that you can actually buy access to be able to use the curriculum. And on the website, all the handouts that we use for the community curriculum and all the recipes are actually open access, so you can use those after the program for any of your patients or clients. We're almost at our last questions here, but Chef Alex, you get another one here, okay? So how can organizations that are community focused like MEBC and BCA Global and findings reported in Dr. Fuster's work be leveraged to help restaurateurs that serve African American and soul food and Puerto Rican fare connect to resources like federal grants, policymakers, et cetera, that could remove barriers and access to finances that might encourage them to include healthier options?
It's a long question. Well, you know, restaurant chefs is pretty difficult to deal with. I've been a restaurant chef. We're kind of hardwired, and that's just the way it is. But you know, I can tell you that there is an opportunity to use restaurants as a community beacon, and that could mean doing workshop trainings in the actual restaurant. You know, Mondays is never a busy day in the restaurant business. I've never seen, no matter what country, and really encourage them. How do we bring in a community, you know, community culinary literacy or training? And those type of programs can be funded. I mean, right now, I know what happened this year is there's a huge push for produce prescriptions and being fine. I mean, you know, governments, I mean, whoever argued that case was very, very successful. So, you know, these are springing up throughout the whole country. And there are models and frameworks to design the, you know, a program that you discussed to put in these restaurants. And I think, you know, if I'm a restaurant chef, I would be like, you know, a little bit peculiar about you want to come in and change my restaurant versus I want to do a program here to help the community and have a one-off, and you can get paid for it, and I can show you how. From a restaurant chef, I'd be like, okay, yeah, let's give it a try, you know? So I think, you know, that might be a considerable strategy to try. And again, you know, right now, post-COVID, restaurants are still suffering. To just look at ancillary revenue models, like, you know, to me, that makes perfect sense. And then, you know, they'll be able to use their off days to make this work for community impact.
Thank you. So this actually goes right along with the question for Dr. Fuster. How did you approach the restaurants that you utilized?
Well, there are a lot of ways. I can tell you many different adventures that we had, because they're hard to reach. And with the LARIA project, for example, we did a lot of work. We wanted to do a lot of work that restaurants have to pay for, like market research, a lot of things that we did. And even though I mean, I had this owner that we ended up not being able to work with him, I told him like 3 times, it's free and we're paying you. And that didn't register because they're not used to people doing things for them. So I think once it clicked after maybe 3 times, it's like, okay, we'll work with you. But then a lot of it happened during the when it was starting to get better with COVID. So some partnerships couldn't happen because of everything that was going on with COVID. So there is that. One thing that has helped is personal networks too, and knowing someone that knows someone that knows, which it's not easy. So I think it's good to invest in that community liaison, somebody from the industry that you pay to provide the connections. Definitely using their space. For the workshops that I mentioned at the end that I'm doing in New Orleans, I'm actually doing on Mondays in local restaurants, and then having that the owners that we're partnering with for these initial luncheons are owners that are known in the community, so they also bring in other restaurants. So I think those personal relationships, spending money at the restaurant, paying them definitely are very key things, and also being patient, because again, I feel that they want to do good to the community, but they don't have the time or even the bandwidth, or sometimes they don't understand what we're trying to do. So it's like different ways of speaking their language has also been a learning curve for me.
Thank you. That was really helpful. Okay, last question, and this goes to all of you. What is your favorite whole grain and your favorite vegetable? And we could say in your culture or just in general. So this, again, you guys all get to answer this question. And depending on how good your answer is, you get an apron. You can start. I can say we can phrase it a different way. What is a food that just makes you feel loved, or that
Oh, that's a different
Do you like
one.
that better?
That's a, yeah.
You might want to go back.
What do you guys think? Do you want to go? I don't know. We're about to have dinner and reception.
All right, I can answer.
Yeah.
Culturally, favorite grain is kasha, specifically kasha varnishkis, which is buckwheat, and not the little kind, I like the big kind. It's a big argument in my household. Favorite vegetable. It's easier just to say the vegetables I don't like. There's just two: celery, yellow squash. That's it.
Does
I
that
can't-
mean
I-
you won't make mirepoix?
I accept it in mirepoix, begrudgingly. But if I can see it, I will pick it out.
For the vegetable, I'm going to say sugar snap peas. I love them. And I don't have a cultural grain. There's no healthy cultural grain for me, but I really love them all. So I'm going to go with the latest one that I've been enjoying, which is camu. But I like them all.
Oh, me? So I guess my favorite vegetable would be aubergine, brinjal, or eggplant. All this means the same thing. And I guess the favorite whole grain, so I base it on the food, so it's chapati, so it's whole wheat. So, yeah.
I'm going to ask a follow-up. How do you like your aubergine?
How do I like it? I was going to say Indian. I make it's onions, onions, tomatoes, and the traditional spices that go in. Yeah. So sorry. That's,
No apologies. That sounds
eat,
wonderful.
I eat South Asian style.
Perfect. Thank you. This is an easy question, or it should be, right?
Yeah, when you say pick one out of so, I've been experimenting lately with ancient grains, that kind of, and I'm still on this journey. So kamut, teff, I mean, there's just so many of them that are just on a resurgence, and not even just the grain itself, but actually even cooking with the flours, right? Which is really amazing, and finding out is it a thickening agent? How can I use it? So I'm putting on my culinary, my food science hat there. And then, in terms of vegetable, lately I've been into cabbages. Why is because it's really what my son likes it, right? So that's
Enough
the first
said.
I can make, at 59 cents a pound, but also I could do a variety of different ways, and I can also juice it. I'm into juicing a couple times a week, and I'll just be putting everything in the slow juicer, and it's just it makes me feel great, and I'm understanding the enzymes and things that kind of have really great impact. So that's it.
Thank you.
It's me. Okay.
I'm
So I'll
looking
just
at you.
say, well, I don't know if that's healthy, but one of the grains that I like a lot is bulgur, is one of it. And vegetable, I'm in between beets and eggplant, but mostly eggplant because I can do it in different ways. So that's roasted, sauteed, so it's really good.
And what was the grain again?
A bulgur.
A bulgur.
Bulgur,
Okay.
yeah.
That's a good one. Last but not least.
I think I need to explore some of those whole grains. My answer might be a little bit boring. I actually like brown rice, although white is still comforting. And then for vegetables, I think I would say, again, not a fancy answer, green beans, but I like the French when they're thin. Yeah.
Well, thank you all. This was a wonderful panel. A big round of applause.